So you're all very welcome, and thanks for coming along to this event. We've stuck you all on mute for the moment. It tends to make the sound better if people kind of stay on mute but unmute yourselves when you want to speak. But we do want to make this as participative as possible. So we'd love to see your comments if you use the chat box, if you have any questions or comments as people are speaking. We also will have plenty of opportunity for Q&A. And there's reactions as well. You can raise your hand, you can clap or put a thumbs up, especially when I'm speaking. That'd be really nice. And the idea is that we have a discussion around this important topic, which is all about resilience and how we can stay resilient. So let's have a look. First of all, I'd like just to test this. Are people using the chat box? So just quickly type in where you're all dialing in from in the chat box, and we'll get a feel for where people are from. And if I'll let you summarize for me. As people pop into the chat. Aoife, you're on mute.
Sorry. I think the majority of people are Scottish based, a lot of Edinburgh. We have Edinburgh via Galway, we have Leith, Goat Bridge, yeah, a mix. So
good. Okay, so we've got a good mix of people. So you're all very welcome wherever you're from. And I want to test the sound as well. So to get us all going, can we unmute everybody? And I'd like everybody to say hello, Gia Gwitch, hi, yay-ho, whatever you like, just so that we can hear everybody at once. So
hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Great, that's all working, which is wonderful. So this is the last event that we had, and we had a networking event. We've launched this series of virtual events that we are running. We wanted to keep Causeway really relevant to our membership. So we've had to do a bit of a pivot, because we're normally, those of you who have engaged with Causeway before, we do a lot of stuff face to face. So this is a good experiment for us and a test of our resilience as an organization as to how we can go virtual. So today, what we're going to do is this bit, the welcome bit. I'll just tell you a wee bit about what Causeway is all about, because we have a mixture of members and non-members here, and people who are very familiar with Causeway and people who don't really know that much about it. I'm going to do a bit about demystifying resilience from kind of my experience as a consultant and coach. We'll then hear from David Maltman from Future Proof Learning and Mike Stevenson from Thinktastic. And I'm delighted that they've agreed to join our panel and share their thinking with us today. And we'll have some polls and questions and hopefully some discussion. We don't have all the answers on a topic as important as this. And actually, I was reminded how important this subject is today when somebody who had wanted to join today contacted me to let me know that they had to be at a virtual funeral because they couldn't go to the real funeral. So we do live in kind of weird times at the moment, and it's definitely a test of our resilience right now. We're not going to focus on COVID-19, but we are going to talk in general terms about resilience. But I feel it's kind of never been more important. And we believe that connecting with people and that networks like Causeway can play a real role in keeping us resilient. So that's kind of the purpose of today. So just to give you a little bit of a background on Causeway and what we're about. So Causeway, it's a business networking organisation. We're supported by the Irish government and the Scottish government, and we're really about connecting businesses and professionals across the Irish Sea. Our real aim is to facilitate growth and development through networking and events. We have a partnership with the British-Irish Trading Alliance, and I know that we've got a couple of joint members of Causeway and BITA here today, so you're very welcome. And we always welcome non-members to our events as well as members. So people who are either interested in the subject we're discussing, or the people that are going to be there, or want to know a little bit more about Causeway. And I don't know if you know, but there's 14,000 Irish people who are giving their skills and talent working in Scotland at the moment. And some of you are on this call, some of us are on this call. And there's 8,000 Scots working in Ireland. And if you add on to that all of the businesses who export and import across the Irish Sea, and all of the professionals and public bodies that collaborate across the Irish Sea, there really is a huge network out there for Causeway to engage with and to help facilitate. So that's what we're about. We've run over 40, I think it is, events over the last about 3 or 4 years, attended by about 500 different companies. About over 2,000 people have attended our events. And we've also facilitated lots of smaller think tanks and meetings and engagements with ministers and ambassadors. And a lot of these have resulted in real connections that have been made that have helped people to grow their businesses or solve their challenges or do things in a new way. We really want to continue to do that. We want to become more relevant than ever to our members, and we want to grow. So if you know of anybody who you think could be interested in joining Causeway, point them our way. We would love to hear from them. So I'm going to move on to a poll next. I'll stop sharing this because we just want to get you thinking about resilience. We think it's a very important topic, but Aoife, if you can run our first poll. I hope everybody can see that. And I'm just trying to take a barometer as to, in the last couple of months, how do you feel? And we'll give it a couple of minutes to get the results in. As I said at the beginning, we feel that resilience is such an important topic, particularly at this time. But to be honest, it was a pretty important topic even before COVID-19. The World Health Organization called out stress as a real global epidemic about 6 months ago. They're now more concerned with pandemics. So I think we'll share the results at this stage. Most people have voted. So as you can see, the majority of people feel a bit more stressed than they were before. So the last 2 months have felt a bit more stressful. With some people that feel things are the same, 5, and we have 15% that feel less stressed than before. So contact me afterwards, because maybe you can deliver our next resilience webinar. But it's kind of what you'd expect as a mixed bag. But I think it does point to the fact that these are times when our resilience is kind of tested, and when we need to be focusing on what we can do differently. So I'm just going to share my screen again. Great. And we're going to move on to Brigid's point of view. So some of you are obviously feeling a little bit like this. It can feel like this is a tough time where either I'm blowing my head up or I'm just feeling a bit not great about the world. And what we want is to feel a bit more like this. So Superman, Supergirl, and turning the impossible possible. I think there's a lot of myths about resilience. And, oh, is this going to work now? Yes. So one myth is that resilience is a trait that you're either born with or you're not. And it's not. Resilience isn't something that you're born with or not. Resilience, it's a skill that you can learn and develop and practice. And not everybody knows this. So people sometimes just think it's not for me. The flip side of that is you get some people who think, and I have to say I was one of those people for a long time early in my career, But I thought, I never suffer from stress. I'm really resilient. I can deal with anything. And then at some stage in your life or career, something's going to hit you like a ton of bricks. And it's quite shocking kind of when that happens if you're not expecting it. Another myth is that resilient people, oh, they're tough, they're independent, they don't need help from others. Actually, resilient people tend to look for help. They tend to lean and value on their friends. Networks like Causeway can play a role, but they're viewed as resources. So your people and your networks are your resources. You don't try to go it alone. Resilient people are immune to stress and negativity, is another myth. But actually, in reality, resilient people choose to respond to challenges positively and to find meaning and purpose in their lives. So they do feel stress. There are times that they're negative, but it's how they deal with that and how they find purpose that tends to make you resilient. And a lot of people think that, oh, adversity makes people stronger. You know, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. But actually, it's not the adversity that makes you stronger. It's the process that you go through when faced with adversity. And we've all been through things like this. When something has happened or when we've reached a stage where we're finding life tough, it's not what you found tough, it's how you dealt with what you found tough. And that is a process of learning and persevering. And sometimes I've found, and I believe, and from the clients I work with, if you can take the long view when you're in a stressful situation and think about, how will I feel about this in 3 weeks' time, in 3 months' time, in 3 years' time, it can kind of help you get some perspective and help you to go through a process to deal with whatever it is that you're dealing with. But it's not easy. And all of these things on the truth side are things that we can work on and develop. I like this quote, Nelson Mandela, you know, don't judge me by my success, but judge me by how many times I fell down and got up again. So again, it's not what happens, it's how I deal with what happens. There's a little model that I use in my coaching and that I've used with myself, acceptance and commitment. So the acceptance part is when we're at a stage where we feel our resilience is really tested, we ask ourselves to accept what it is, to actually face up, here is what I'm facing. So I've had a project that's gone horribly wrong. The kind of first step in resilience is accepting what's gone wrong. And then very quickly thereafter, the commitment stage is, and what helps me out of this? So I accept it's gone wrong. I'm not going to keep saying, why did this happen? Why did I not do something different? You know, why has COVID-19 happened? I wish we were, you know, it was 6 months ago. I wish this hadn't happened. That actually doesn't help very much. But here's what I'm facing. This has happened and this is the impact. But here's what helps me out of this. And there's a little model that I use that helps me in terms of the resilience and the building resilience that it's called SSRI. So it's about you thinking about your own strategies. So the strategies are the things that you do. We all have, strategy might sound like a kind of a big word for this, but it's just how we manage things, how we manage ourselves. So it can be things like mindfulness. You know, breathing is undervalued as a resource that we have. Learning to breathe properly, it really helps at times of stress. Breathing in slowly and breathing out slowly. I'm going to pause just for a second, let everybody just take a big deep breath in. Hold it. Let it go. And if you do that a few times, that really has an impact on your stress. Exercise helps. You know, it could be writing for you. It's finding what the good stuff is for you that feeds you and that gives you strength. And then the strengths are the things that we have within ourselves. So are we self-aware? Are we flexible? Have we courage? Have we compassion? It's what are the things that we have within us that are our inner strengths, and thinking about those and identifying them in ourselves. And the resources are the things that we draw on for inspiration and support. So they are things like the places we go. Well, we can't go to, if you like going to the beach, maybe you can't go to the beach now, but you can go there in your mind. But the places we go, the people we want to engage in. I know some of us on the call have pets because we were talking about them earlier. So my dog is a resource for me if things get to me. It might be books you read, it might be apps you go to. And the insights then are the perspective that you have on the focus. So it's the ideas, perspective, the sayings, the philosophy that you hold that might help you at a time of stress and a time when you feel you need to build your resilience. And if we work on these areas, they really will help to build resilience. So that's a little bit of kind of the musings of Brigid Whoriskey on resilience. We have another poll now that we want to run, so I'll get Aoife to do the poll. And that is, I just want to hear how resilient you feel today. So this is just how you're dealing today, from nothing to I can do anything. I'm invincible. And we'll give it a couple of minutes for people to give their answers. And if you could, if you've done it, in the chat box, I'd be interested in what you do to help with your resilience. Is there anything that you do that you find really helpful in your resilience? And we'll have a little look at that as well. So how do you build your own resilience? Okay. So here we go. So the good thing is, while people feel more stressed than they were 2 months ago in general, most people are feeling reasonably good at how they're managing things and how resilient they're feeling today. This is just a here and now. You might feel different tomorrow. You might feel even better tomorrow. But we do have some people that are feeling the resilience is still a bit tested. And that's where we need to draw on the resources that we have, those strengths and strategies, etc., that could help us. Aoife, I'm going to ask you if you can summarize some of the comments that have come in, or the things that people have suggested.
Yeah, other suggestions such as gardening, watching TED Talks, breathing, yoga, exercise again, jogging, yoga, music, playing guitar, reading books. Yeah, taking time every day to do something that you really enjoy, whether that be exercise, art activity, or watching a show, and practicing mindfulness again. Making a cup of tea even.
But it is, it can be the simplest things that help us. I like the listening to the far more sensible dog. So thanks for that. I'm going to hand over to our next speaker. So I'm going to hand over to David Maltman, and David is a senior consultant with Future-Proof Learning. David, I'll let you explain to people what Future-Proof Learning is, and over to you.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen before I start, if that's all right. So you should hopefully be able to see it now. If you can give me a thumbs up, excellent. Yeah, so I work for a company called Future-Proof Learning. We're a consultancy business based in and around central Scotland. The vast majority of what we do is people skills or soft skills, do coaching, leadership development, training courses, and that sort of stuff. And resilience is actually not something that we run courses on or anything, but it is a topic that comes up in a lot of what we do, especially in coaching. It's something that we cover quite a lot. And we ran a webinar on it about 4 weeks ago, I think, which is, I think, partly why Brigid asked if I could present part of this today. So resilience is kind of a big deal, which Brigid already covered. But I think for me, it's a key skill for anybody to have. And like Brigid quite rightly said, it's not something we're all either born with or not. It is something that can be developed over time, and you can develop it in different ways as well. And a couple of people have mentioned mindfulness in the chat there. One of the key things in meditation or in mindfulness is that the aim isn't to try and block out thoughts as they come into your head. It's to kind of acknowledge them, address them, and then keep moving forward. And I think that's completely true of resilience as well. It's not about trying to be tough or trying not to let things affect you. It's about how you adapt to things or how you react to the situation and continue moving forward. And developing, I feel like Brigid's kind of read my notes here, but developing your own resilience isn't just about, obviously it's good for you, but it is good for other people. It's good for the people that you know, good for your community. And if you're able to build on your own personal resilience, you can then be there for other people when the time calls for it. And I've got, the reason I didn't put it in the chat is I've got some sort of real practical things that you can either start or stop doing today, hopefully after the call's finished at least, but I'll come on to that in a second. I wanted to ask if I could ask everybody to put in the chat, just wanted to ask a question, which was, what was your biggest win or biggest achievement from yesterday? And it can be anything you like, big or small, but it's big to you. Mine was actually just that I went for a big walk and did the gardening yesterday, so not hugely profound, but it was an achievement for me nonetheless. So I'll give you a minute or so to do that. And what I'll do is come back at the end of my bit when there's time for questions. So I've got quite a lot of stuff, well, I've got some stuff that you can start doing, but actually I thought what might be a good idea is to talk about what we can stop doing, first of all. I'm a doer, so I find it quite difficult not to do things or to stop doing things at times, but there's only 3 things here, and the best part is that it should be easy. It shouldn't hamper your life in any way to stop doing these things, and it should just become routine as well. It's, like I said, short list, there's only 3 things on it, and it's not just for times of pandemic, but it is especially relevant now. So the first thing for me is to stop checking the news so much. It's not to stop checking it at all, but just to stop checking it so much. It's easy to do, and it's really tempting to kid ourselves that we need to be fully up to date with everything that's going on in the news. But I mean, I suppose a quick show of hands, do we really get much out of watching the news for hours every day? If you think you do, feel free to put your hand up. I'm not going to disagree with you. I can't see any hands, so I'm hoping everybody agrees with me. But yeah, I don't know about you, but I get breaking news updates on my phone, whether I want them or not. I check the news every day, but not for ages. I usually just read the sort of top 10 articles on BBC, things like that. But every now and then I'll spend a bit of time watching the news. What I found was when COVID started gathering steam, I felt I'm not a very anxious person. I don't feel that I get stressed very often, but I found myself getting quite anxious, and that then increased the frequency that I checked the news, and also the amount of time I spent following the news, whether it was on TV or on apps or on Twitter, however it was. And consequently, the more time I spent checking the news, the more anxious I became about the situation, which was totally out with my control. So on someone else's advice, I wish it was my own advice, I stopped checking the news so much. And funnily enough, I found that I felt less anxious almost immediately. And then I found myself spending less and less time checking the news. Still fairly up to date with it, but I don't feel the need to sit looking at stuff for hours every day. So just a reminder on that. The advice is simple, it's just stop checking the news so much. if you can, limit it to once a day, and ideally limit the amount of time that that once a day lasts. So don't make it one period of 6 hours watching the news. I think you might be surprised at how little you miss, but I think you'll be surprised at how much you get back from it as well. And the second thing's kind of related, but it's to not stop, but to limit social media use. And it might be a bit more difficult. It's very difficult for me, and I've still got a long way to go, but it is essential. And again, if I could just do a show of hands, how many of you have received like forwarded messages on Facebook or WhatsApp about cures for coronavirus or conspiracy theories and things like that? If you just put your hand up if you've received at least one. A few hands? Yeah. Maybe you've got better friends than I have online. But certainly, since this all kicked off, I find that's the vast majority of social media for me. It is a great thing, and it is really useful for keeping in touch with people, like Causeway, for example. But it can also start to kind of seep into your life. I think it is really important to be mindful about the amount of time that you spend on social media. A question I ask myself quite a lot is, what purpose is this serving? And quite often, if I'm sort of browsing mindlessly on social media and I ask myself that question, the answer is none. Like it almost never serves a purpose for me. So I just come off it for a while. Even more so than the news, I think you'll probably find that if you spend less time on social media, you're really not missing anything at all. If you're using it to video call friends and family and things like that, or keeping in touch with people, that's serving a purpose and it's absolutely fine. But the kind of aimless browsing, that's the sort of stuff that you can win your time back from, and probably is worth taking a break from that. And then my third step is to stop worrying about what you can't control. Now that's much easier said than done. I don't expect you to just suddenly stop doing it because I've said it. And it takes quite a bit of getting used to, but it's worth the effort that you put into it in spades. If we focus on what we can control and we do our best with that, then that's all you can do. You can walk away saying you've tried your best with something. But if we try and put our efforts into things that we can't control or change things that aren't within our gift, then we're much more likely to be more stressed, to be more anxious, and to kind of downtrodden, really. So take action on the things that you can influence and try to worry less about the things that you can't. And there's a saying, I tried to find out who it was from, but I couldn't, but there's a saying that says, if you fight the current, you'll drown. And I think that is true. If you spend all your time and effort trying to change things you've no control over, you'll just find yourself swamped by it all. So those are the things that we can stop doing, and I've got some things that we can start doing, which is partly why I didn't put anything on the chat when Brigid asked the question. But things that you can start doing right now to improve your own resilience. The biggest one for me, or the best place to start, is routine. I couldn't really find a picture for routine, so this had to do. But the best guidance I can offer here is, and you might not like this, but it's to get up earlier than usual in the morning, just an hour max. It doesn't need to be any more than an hour. You can do it in less, and take some time for yourself. So do some exercise that can either be indoor or outdoor, whatever you want. Read a book or an e-reader, but just not your phone, not the news or the computer, not work. And take some time to yourself and enjoy peace and quiet. So it might be meditation. If that's not your thing, just enjoy quiet. You don't need to do anything, but just take the time for yourself. There's a book called The 5 AM Club by a guy called Robin Sharma. I wasn't really that big a fan of it, just the way that it was written, but there were some really good takeaways in it. And he suggests a thing called the 20-20-20 approach in the morning. So it's a loose framework of 20 minutes of exercise, 20 minutes of mindfulness, and 20 minutes of learning. It's up to you however you do that. It's not prescriptive, it's just a framework, it's not a script. And the second thing I've kind of already hinted at was exercise. So in terms of exercise, it's a really nice thought that we might all get a home gym or start doing home workouts or get really into running and cycling. and come out of isolation in the shape of your life. But while that might be the case for some people, I think for most of us, it's just good to get the endorphins going and avoid stagnating in the house so much, at least while we still can go outside. The big one for me is actually just going for a walk. I love it. I do it every day. I did it before we came on the call. And I think you'll be surprised at how much you get out of that, even if the weather's not very good. I see most people are around Edinburgh from the chat. I went for a walk on Tuesday afternoon. It was roasting when I went out. I went out for like 45 minutes, didn't take a jacket, and about 10 minutes into the walk, it started pouring with rain, and I just continued on. I was freezing when I got back, but I did still enjoy it. And I proved to myself I'm not just a fair weather walker. But yeah, beyond walking, there's any number of other things you can do, things you can do in the house. You can look up stuff online, and the vast majority of the stuff is free as well, so you don't need to spend anything other than a bit of time and effort. It doesn't need to cost. My own coach talks about there being a physical and mental health continuum, so a bit of a kind of chicken and egg thing about each having an influence on each other. I think, again, advice is just simple. Start exercising however you want, but start doing it because you will feel better, especially if it's part of the routine. And probably the most important one, again, difficult to find an image for this, but is just to engage. And I think if you do nothing else, like if you don't stop doing any of the things I said, you don't start any of the things I said, if you do nothing else except engage, this is the very best thing you can do. There's any number of ways you can do it, as ever, but the important thing is to find a medium to engage with people, and it's okay to use different ones for different things. The important thing is just to be speaking to people, reaching out to them, and opening up to them. And the more you open up to them, the more you'll get back. I'd imagine when most of you were young, you're probably like me, that Christmas was about getting presents from everybody else, and it was class getting presents. I mean, it still is, but when you were younger, getting presents at Christmas was amazing. But as we've gotten older, it's become more about giving presents to other people, and that's far more rewarding. And I feel like that's a much better feeling, giving things to other people. And in the end, you do usually get something back anyway. So even if you're just giving to others, chances are you'll get something back as well. And the kind of almost last thing I'll say about it is to seize the opportunity which we have at the moment. It does sound glass more than half full, I think, but it is true. All of our hands have been forced just now. We've had to make loads of changes, and we've already had to seize opportunities whether we wanted to or not. I think almost all of us have got at least one project that you meant to go back to that you've just never really found time for. I know Brigid certainly has been doing courses online and things, so she's kind of trailblazing, she steps ahead of me. But at the moment anyway, there's not really anywhere we can go, so you have time to do things, whatever you want to do. And just on a slightly more serious note, in times of chaos and things, when everything's up in the air, you can't afford to take risks and to make risky decisions, because when things are already so chaotic, almost anything you do is going to be better than doing nothing. If you're standing still, you're really going backwards. And there's a quote from Voltaire, I think it is, not that I'm a big reader, but of Voltaire anyway, but the quote is, "Perfection is the enemy of the good." It was used by Michael Ryan from the World Health Organization a few weeks ago, but it is as relevant as ever. There's almost never a right time for things. And if you spend all your time trying to create perfect conditions before you do something, you'll miss your chance, and it's better to be too early than it is to be too late.
David, I'm rudely interrupting. Sorry, just to give a little time check.
That's fine. I'm about to say my final point, but thank you. The last thing as well was just to make the most of the situation you're in now and to learn something. I would say this being a learning development business. And just some final takeaways on my slide there. What is your biggest win of the day? I've covered that, and I'm going to look at the chat in a second. And just ask yourself, what's one thing that you're doing today to protect your future mental health? And final strapline for real is that we're a community. Everybody's in the same boat just now, so work together and share with each other and take advantage of things like Causeway while you can. And that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, David. I've just learned something new for me. I need to find a way on Zoom of communicating as you would at a conference where you put up your hand and go.
Or you could just,
typical of me. Sorry, David?
I was just saying, you could just make me stick to time. It's not your fault I ran
No.
out.
We've tried to, as always, for me, I always try to cram as much as I can into everything. But we're about to hand over to Mike. But before that, I just want to quickly open it up for a couple of minutes, because I'm sure some people on the call will want to say something, and we'll do this again at the end. So if you just raise your hand if you want to say something. I might pick on somebody first, because Jane McCulloch, if I'm not putting you on the spot, we had a bit of a chat this week, and I just really be interested in, you know, your take on how we manage this whole personal resilience thing.
Thanks, Brigid, and a lot of what David was saying there rang extremely true to me. In the nature of what we do in the consulate, obviously escaping from the news is particularly difficult. Monitoring developments on a near continuous basis was actually part of our work in the beginning, as we committed to helping citizens and being very much in that crisis response mode. So I certainly found that getting in on myself and trying to keep perspective was a bit of a challenge, and trying to keep the short, the medium and the long term in balance. So I decided to cut myself in giving myself a break. And I took myself away for the weekend to the guest bedroom. So I took a Monday off, just knowing that not being at work in a day that everybody else was would be beneficial in its own right. Deleted Twitter from my phone, only check the news each morning. And in order to, I'm not really an escapist. So it was quite difficult to convince myself that this is really going to work. So I ordered some really, really nice groceries from a local enterprise here in the part of Edinburgh I live in, and made up the guest bedroom really nicely, got out the good towels, went for a walk down to Ravenston Woods with the dog, where I had been before. I just tried to do things differently for an entire weekend, and it was incredibly effective. I was so relaxed at the end of the 3 days. So now every weekend I'm sleeping in the guest bedroom, and I haven't quite got to the point of deleting Twitter every weekend, but I've definitely actually found that it broke a habit, and I've been much more disciplined in managing accessing the news during the day, and it's made my use of time a lot better in the working days. So it's a great luxury to have a guest bedroom to go off and treat myself for the weekend in the circumstances. And you know, but I think the main message, a change is as good as a rest. So if there's something you can do that shifts from what you're otherwise doing every other day, it can be incredibly effective.
That's great. I'm delighted to know that story, because I love that story, and there's a version of that we can all do, and it very much resonates with some of the things that David was saying in his excellent presentation there on, you know, some of it is about the simple stuff, isn't it? But it's really hard to do that simple stuff when you're feeling quite stressed. So who else would like to give a point of view at this stage? I'm kind of looking to try and see hands raised. Megan Harkins, you were speaking to me earlier on as well. Do you want to unmute yourself and say hi? Megan is one of our pending young professionals in Causeway. We're developing our young professionals network.
Yeah, hi. Thanks.
You haven't joined yet, Megan. You better join soon.
Straight after. Yeah, thanks to Brigid and David for that. That was really insightful. And I think one of the things that struck me through all of that is actually gaining a bit of self-awareness seems to be really key through all of this. So gaining ourselves what makes us feel good, because that's different kind of to everyone. And I think one of the things that really helps me is being able to monitor what feels good, because you might not realize that at the time. But I know, you know, there's a lot of things out there that we can use to monitor our mood, to monitor, and when you look back and see actually I find every Monday really challenging. And when you can see the passion of that, that I know that I find that challenging. So it's about that kind of proactiveness about what can I do then to help myself find Mondays maybe slightly less challenging. And kind of one of the things that you touched upon, David, as well, is this cycle of mental health, where we kind of get this understanding that mental health, just as physical health, is on a scale, and we can all be at different levels of the scale at all different points in our lives and things like that. So one of the things, I'm working with a kind of startup company just now, and what we're really trying to do, especially during this crisis, is help businesses and companies to help their employees by supporting their mental health. And it's through that it not only builds a personal resilience for the employees themselves, but that then helps build a company resilience. Because if you're taking the time, the effort to look after your employees, I think that that to me, it really helps. And it's about kind of learning those strategies. And David, you highlighted that you've been feeling a lot more anxious in this past week. And I mean, actually almost 70% of people in the UK have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just something that, it's about that understanding of that. So that's kind of something that we're working on just now.
That's brilliant, Megan. And I can see in the chat as well from the question that David asked, people have suggested a couple of things and a couple of resources. And maybe we can give the details of that app as well. We'll send out a resource list after this, just from various material that we'd recommend. So thanks for that. So I'd like to hand over to Mike now for our third speaker, and we'll hopefully have time for a bit of Q&A after that. If people aren't rushing off at 5, we're free to stay on and continue the conversation, but I am aware some people might have time constraints. So Mike, sorry for keeping you so long, and over to you.
It's okay. I'm delighted to be doing this, and I'm going to tell stories actually, because sometimes the best way to illustrate a subject as big as resilience is to talk from your own life and from those people who you've met, where you've seen what resilience actually is in the flesh. And I'm going to start with something that really underpins, I think, what a resilient person, what differentiates them from someone who's less resilient, and that is purpose. I remember when I'd gone from sleeping out in London in 1966 and 67, I began to work in building sites, and I was a bricklayer's assistant going from one site to another. And you would arrive and you would have a task to do and you would complete that, and you'd have to do it within a time scale. And it was very dissatisfying because you were just, isolated in your part of the work. And one day I arrived in the site in Earls Court, and it was a start from scratch site. And there was a big Welsh foreman with a spade-like hands and a soft hat and a broken nose. And he put his arm around me and he says, "Welcome, Michael." I realized I'd never been welcomed in a workplace before. But then he took me to this hut, and he showed me the drawings, the elevation of this plan, something that Eugene will know about, being an architect. And he said, "This is the palace you're building. Come and remind yourself every day of the palace you're building." And I felt this astonishing, burst of energy, because it was the first time I felt it was part of the big picture. So I went to work with a purpose for the first time in my life. And when I went to the pub at night, I would tell people I was building a palace, and it was a real energizer. So just to illustrate that further, I was in Beirut 2 days after the bombing in 2006. You remember that fortnight of relentless bombing? And I got a taxi into South Beirut, where the bombing had been most concentrated. And I was walking around, it was devastating. It was rubble everywhere. And you see all the accoutrements, children's toys buried under the slabs of concrete, cars that had been squashed. And there was a guy selling clothes on top of the rubble. And the guy who'd driven me there said that used to be his shop. And my instant response was to think that he'd suffered a loss. So I said to him, "It must have been terrible losing your shop." And he said, I'm not a shopkeeper. I give people silent confidence. And I thought, wow, that's what resilience is like when you've got purpose. Because he saw the shop not as an end in itself, but just a vehicle to help him fulfill his purpose. Does that make sense? It was extraordinary. And then, actually, just to top that story off, I said to my driver, I said, that was a real road to Damascus moment for me. And he said, actually, you're on the road to Damascus. It was true. Straight ahead was Damascus. So that illustrated to me that purpose is everything. And I say that because you can get knocked sideways, you can fall, but if you've got a purpose, the purpose becomes the all-conquering reason for your being. Does that make sense? So when people talk about, I do this and I do that, I always ask them to think of what they do in terms of purpose. An insurance salesman once said to me, I sell insurance, and I wanted to run to the nearest toilet, frankly, because I didn't want to be sold insurance. And I said to him afterwards, why don't you tell people I help people sleep at night? And he started doing that. And the result was, people would said to him, do you deal under a hypno? Do you walk around with a baseball bat? Are you an anaesthetist? He says, no, I find people the right insurance so that their business and their family are looked after and they can sleep at night. And his business began to rocket as a result of that. So this thing about purpose is really important. But there's something else. When I got chucked out of school at 15 and had a really difficult start in life. So I had a very rocky beginning. And I did lots of things on the route to where I am now, which is I speak and I train people and I run creative activities so that companies, if they get into a wee bit of a straitjacket, can find imaginative routes out of it. So as well as purpose, the way you get there can be a rocky road. But as long as you remember why you exist, what you want to do, you can take falls because your direction of travel remains the same. Does that make sense? You know where you're going. You can fall, you can trip, you can meet accidents, you can meet people who are resistant. And it is really about making sure that every step of the way you're learning something. I've had so many failures, I could spend the next half an hour talking about them. But failure is part of that journey. And it's important to recognize that failure is a really important part of life. Children fall all the time when they're learning to walk, don't they? Children fall, but children immediately get up again. And the only time they stay down is when a parent says to them, oh dear, you've fallen. Am I right? They respond to concern, but they respond better to being ignored. They'll just get up and they'll do it. And that's what we have. That's the capacity we have as human beings, is to be able to stand and keep going whenever we face this difficulty. And that's what resilience is. But there's something else about the learning journey, because I've just started lockdown acting lessons online, right? Because I have to keep taking on new challenges. It what gives me the energy to keep going in life. And I love learning new things. And learning is really the elixir of life, because when you're learning, you're distracted, you're challenging yourself, you're finding this adrenaline, this enormous energy that comes from learning something new. So learning is really important. And when you're at home just now, use every resource to learn something that you haven't thought of before, something outside your sphere of influence, something outside your comfort zone. Someone once said to me, your comfort zone is a very comfortable place, but nothing ever grows there. And when we keep growing, we develop our resilience. So purpose, learning, and growth. But the final thing I want to talk about, and this adds on to something that Brigid and David have both said, and Megan said as well, that when I was sleeping out, I had this extraordinary experience. I was approached one night in Piccadilly Circus. It was a very cold night, And this van drew up and this woman jumped out. She was from a charity and she said, you know, we will give you accommodation in this hostel tonight, and in the morning we'll help you find, you know, more permanent accommodation. I thought, brilliant. And I was taken to this place called a Spike in Peckham. And the first thing that happened to me was I was shown into this green tiled room. And the next thing I know, I was told to take my clothes off. And I did. And then a hose was pointed at me and unleashed. And I can't tell you how small I felt. And I realized then that, you know, I wasn't looking for accommodation first and foremost. I wanted to feel significant, to feel valued, to feel that I had a history, maybe even dreams. But that didn't happen. So I escaped back into the streets because I had more dignity then. But that was a real lesson, that every day we have all these interactions with people, you know, on the way to work, in our home, with our families, with our colleagues. And I made the decision then that I was going to use every interaction I had as a means to lift people's spirits, not sink their spirits. Now, if you think about it, even eye contact or a lack of eye contact or body language can belittle people. At times like this, you have to reach out and you have to help other people to lift their spirits, because every time you do that, you're lifting your own spirits. Does that make sense? And also, if you've treated people well throughout the last, you know, 10, 15, 60, 70 years, then they're more likely to respond to you when you make contact with them. You don't want them saying, well, that bastard, he phoned me up after 10 years. You know, what's he ever done for me? You want people to feel good about themselves, because that helps you to feel good about yourself. So I have this real thing about using every single interaction to lift people's spirits. And if you want my purpose, it is that, is to get people to realize the inestimable resourcefulness that they have at their disposal. And because I've been through so many, you know, falls and you know, done so much and had so many failures, I'm pretty well placed to talk about resilience, but it's experiential rather than intellectual. I've tried to put a construct in it, you know, doing it intellectually and saying, what is it that made me resilient? And I'll tell you this, it is the ability to fail, the ability to see that what you do is not contingent on all the kind of paraphernalia that you have around you. That when we're stripped back, our purpose doesn't need the paraphernalia. And when we keep learning, we keep feeding this part of our brain that needs to be challenged all the time. And at times like this, it's a great time of renewal and reinvention. So don't think of going back to where you were. Don't think of bouncing back, which is Boris's favourite phrase. I do occasionally watch the news. I'll say something of that just finally, but you bounce forward. Make your mind up to bounce forward, not simply go back to where you were. And that to me is an exciting challenge. I actually have grown to enjoy uncertainty, because uncertainty, you know, it does challenge us and it makes us, you know, have to be creative and imaginative in the way that we approach life, because certainty means that you don't change track. And when something comes along and hits you, you're completely lost. Am I right in that? That actually uncertainty should be something that excites us. Now, I'm approaching 70. I'll be 70 in a month's time. And I told myself when I was down and out in London that I was either going to go down or go up. And I decided that I was going to go up the way. And I taught myself this phrase, and I keep telling myself, and it is, the best is yet to come. So I'm nearly 70, and my best is yet to come. Because I'm 70 doesn't mean I've slowed down. It doesn't mean my ambitions are any less, and it doesn't mean my purpose has been fulfilled. In fact, I've just been fired up by this coronavirus. I find it exciting. So find the excitement in this uncertainty and use this time to repurpose yourself by learning and aim to bounce forward, not back. Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
I don't know how long that was.
Thank you. Thank you. People are clapping you. So wow, there's been so much packed into this. I know we're just about out of time, but we've packed a lot in. And Aoife will be getting our last poll up, I think. But from David's part around that, what I've taken away from that is I'm going to find one negative thing I'm going to take away and one positive thing I'm going to start doing from tomorrow, because there's something we can keep picking away at in that mix. And Jane's suggestion might just be the positive thing I do this weekend. If it's good enough for the Consul General of Ireland, it's good enough for me. And I love the emphasis on purpose that has come out of what Mike said, but I think throughout, and that bouncing forward, not kind of bounce back, but the bouncing forward to me is more of a purposeful way forward. For those who enjoyed Mike's piece, we are talking about doing a full webinar with Mike, just exploring some of the things that he's just touched on here. So watch out for that. I'm putting you on the spot now, Mike.
Oh, great.
And Aoife, can you run our last poll? Which is just about the future events that we want to run. So it helps us. So this is just some suggestions, and it just helps us if you take any and all that you would be interested in the future. So online networking, we ran a Connect with Causeway networking event last week, and it was really about just people talking to each other, and we asked some questions and getting everybody participating. This, I would say, is around kind of a personal development, subject-specific type topic. We can do things in individual sectors with maybe smaller round tables or regional events. We have something coming up on climate emergency. Are people interested in COVID-19? I think people are COVID-19'd out of it. So we'll just share the results. So we've got a mixture, as you'd expect, with the area of most interest, I think, is kind of the subject-specific personal development areas. But actually, there's a range of things that people are interested in, and I think that's what we'll try to do. We'll try to continue with a range of events that people might be interested in. We're not going to close now, but if anybody needs to go, it's just after 5. But I am happy to continue for a few more minutes if people would like to tell us. I'd love to hear from some people on the call what they have done to, oh, we're sharing this again. Sorry, I think we've already shared this, haven't we? So if anybody does want to continue the conversation, please do. Otherwise, our next event is in 2 weeks' time, isn't it? Aoife, can you help me?
Look if you want to.
Next Thursday, 21st of May.
Next week.
Covering our cities in the climate emergency.
Yeah.
Megan is on.
So it's a discussion across people in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Dublin and Belfast on the climate emergency and how we can facilitate growth in our cities and respond to the climate emergency. So it's going to be, I think it'll be really interesting. And we have a pub quiz coming up on the 28th. So you're welcome to join that. And we have a Meet the Members session, which our Consul General will be featuring on the panel, Jane McCulloch. And we've got 2 other great panel members as well that will be joining that. So we'll send you all the details. So I'm going to enable people to go who want to go, but could I ask if anybody would like to just join in the conversation for the next 10 minutes to please do so, because I'd love to hear from some of you. So either raise your hand or just come off mute and shout. Right, Eugene.
Thanks very much, Brigid, for that. It's been really interesting. I think one of my sort of feelings as I was listening to the presentations is this mixture of when you think about things in the short term, it all seems fine. I can get sorted till Friday, but where are we a month from now? Well, sort of anyone's guess. And part of my role is to try and think forward and to, in the business sense and make plans for what might be the case in a month's time and 6 months' time. And in the current uncertainty, that's sort of an ever-moving target. And as some people on the call will know, you know, I did a sort of session with everyone in the office one Monday afternoon about 4 o'clock, and by the time the press briefing was over at 5:30, everything I had said was basically out of date. You know, that process of, I find myself balancing the two. Short term, I can deal with, I know where I'm going. Long term, I can only do so much of that at any one time.
That's about dealing with the uncertainty, isn't it, Eugene? Because, you know, you can do great plans for the future, and then part of that is not in your control. So how do we, I think in planning, we need to have quite a bit of kind of agility in terms of, you know, timings, and there's just so much out of our control, and that's tough.
Yeah, it means you got to move fast when there is information.
Yeah. John Corbett.
Yeah, I find this. Thank you, Eugene. I think I find this time fascinating because it brings out. I'm fascinated to know what the disruption is going to be. I probably am a natural disruptor in any event, but will it really make a difference to society? You know, society has got an incredible opportunity at the moment, and will it actually take that opportunity? Will it indeed be allowed to take the opportunity? And how will big business, how will the big insurance companies and whatever, how will they deal with this? Do they see this as an opportunity, or no, I just want to be same old, because quite frankly, I'm in this position, I've got a business plan, and it took me 6 years to get here, and I retire in 2 years, so sod you, I'm not going to do anything. I mean, is that going to be the reaction of big business, or are they going to be forced to change, and wanting to change almost, but wanting to be forced?
Are you listening to this now?
What's he talking about? Do you mind if I respond to that?
Yeah, please do,
on
David.
behalf of big business.
A wee bit of interference there, I think. Go on.
So my initial response, John, isn't going to be that helpful, which is a bit of both. I think lots of people or lots of businesses might want to maintain what was the status quo, or try to return to what was the status quo. But I would like to think that more businesses and more people will try to seize the opportunity. And I think lots of people's hands have been forced. A couple of calls that I've been on recently, businesses have been talking about, but there was one business in particular, we're talking about looking for a new premises where they were going to have 80% of the staff working in a massive new office and 20% working at home. And then because of all this disruption, they've actually flipped it on its head, and they're aiming to have 20% of their staff in a smaller office than they have now, and 80% of their staff working at home. Obviously, you see how employees feel about that and things, but I would like to think that there'll be a more flexible approach to work and to life, really, because at the moment, most people aren't able to work in a traditional sense, or in the sense that they traditionally were prior to the pandemic. So now that everybody's had a taste of it, I would like to think that people want to stick with it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, David and John. I mean, I think there is a question over what will happen in the future. Will we seize the opportunity, or will that be a challenge? And I guess that the jury's out. But I hear a lot where people are talking about the new normal and waiting for the new normal. And I guess what I hope we can all do is actually be part of creating the new normal, not waiting for it, but actually creating it. So, I mean, Causeway is a small organization, but, you know, it's certainly, we will continue to do stuff digitally as well as face-to-face when we can get back around the table and see each other. And I'm not sure that we would have moved quickly enough before if we weren't forced to by this. So I think there'll be things that will happen, but it would be a shame if we missed the opportunity of doing things differently, I think.
I think that this forum is interesting. I mean, if I was to see you guys, it would take an entire evening to see you.
Yeah.
I might get talking to 2 or 3 of you and hear what you've got to say, but here I can take an hour and I can hear 18 people. And so it's and
actually our climate emergency session next week, it is about bringing the thinkers and decision makers across 4 cities to really start debating. So it's one of a number of events, how we can grow our cities or survive in our cities, given what we've been hit, but also tackle the climate change. It's trying to facilitate that. Can we seize the moment, sort of thing? But who knows? We can all do our bit. Would anybody else like to come in? I'm conscious of time. Mike.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we are going to see some fairly dramatic changes. I've been involved in a number of discussions with people here in Ireland, in America, in Poland, in Germany. That's the great thing about Zoom, isn't it? Mm-hmm. There are all these conversations about a new enlightenment, and there are some realities which I think we will confront. One is climate change will go right to the top of the agenda. There's still been this bit of resistance. You know, ExxonMobil spends billions of pounds trying to promote opposition to climate change, denying it. Donald Trump, denial. There's an element of that in this country as well, but I think climate change will go right to the top of the agenda, and that will mean that homeworking will become, you know, an imperative, not just because, you know, we've got used to it, and not just because it's cost effective, but also because, you know, we want to see less people travelling to work by motor car and by public transport. But I also think there's going to be new ideas around how businesses function. And, you know, we've got a gap between the rich and the poor at the moment, which is really crippling our society. And one of the things that we're beginning to learn is that when crisis like this comes along, it is the poor and the dispossessed that are the most disproportionately affected. Mm. And, you know, I don't think that looking forward, poverty is going to be an accepted part of society. I think we'll find ways, whether it's universal basic income or what the Scandinavian countries do, which is they've got far more equal society. And I think that there's some fairly deep, profound thinking we need to do to bounce forward. And I think businesses will have to function in a way that, you know, respects the planet, respects their people, and also respects, you know, profit as an equal partner to these other things. So I think we're going to see a sea change, and I'm quite excited about that. I think it's in our hands to do that. I also think Scotland and Ireland are going to be fairly key in defining the future. That's my view. Yeah. And I hear people from America saying the same thing, that it will be the Celtic nations that begin to reinvent the world, because that's historically what's happened. And I think we should be excited about that.
No, that's great. And I mean, that I feel we could do a whole other webinar on that. So I'm going to hold myself back, because I couldn't agree more with you. But I know we are running out of time. But Judith, could I pull you in? Would you like to contribute? Oh, maybe we've lost Judith.
Yeah, I don't think she's on.
All right. Okay. She'd responded on the chat to say I'll contribute, and then I was just getting to her now. So we've maybe time just for one more. If anybody else would like to just give me a Brenda. You're on mute, Brenda.
Oh, sorry. Where am I?
Hi.
Yeah,
you're off mute now.
I'm off, okay. I just thought that was really useful, because running a small business where quite a lot of my staff have been furloughed, I'm about to have a Zoom meeting with them and introduce the concept of, you know, coming out of furlough where they've been well behaved and staying at home, and it's quite scary. And as an opticians, we're not going back to what we were. The next time my clients see me, it won't be the smiling face, it'll be the mask. I think I'll have to wear a photograph on my front to reassure them that I'm still there behind the mask. And what's tricky is that usually in a business, you're confident, you know the business, you train your staff. This is different because we don't really know the future and how much is changing. So we have to sort of take a bit at a time and kind of have an idea of what's ahead, but yet be able to give our client, or, you know, both our clients and our staffs, you know, a sense of confidence, the security. So I got some really good phrases today from Mike and that on kind of bounce forward, you know, that we're not going back. It's not going back to work to what we were. It's going back to a whole new setup. And I just found it really, really helpful. Thanks a million.
Oh, thanks for that, Brenda. And that is a lovely, positive way to end. And I did notice in the chat somebody saying that the best part of their day yesterday was, I think it was Noreen, bringing 2 staff back from furlough that really wanted to get back to work. Which, you know, that's what it's about, isn't it? It's so good to hear those stories. But
they've been texting me every week since they were furloughed about 7 weeks ago, saying any news, any update, when are we coming back? And I'm like, guys, as soon as I can bring you back, you'll be the first 2 to come back. Thankfully, yesterday that was 2 more come back to the team, so it's good.
That's brilliant. And I think that the challenge for those of us who are leading teams or, you know, having our networks that we're in contact with, it's not just about how I stay resilient for me, it's about how I can contribute to helping other people to be resilient. And that's really hard when you're running a business. For those of you who are running businesses, you're trying to deal with all of that uncertainty and difficulty, but you've got to try and bolster your people.
I think
sorry,
I was going to say, just to reiterate what some others have said, and Brendan, that we're not going back to what was normal yesterday. Tomorrow is a new day. Mike says we've got to bounce forward. I'm a big believer in always moving forward, never standing still. And I think we just need to look at how we're going to move forward business-wise and how it's going to change. As I say, speaking to a couple of colleagues yesterday that live down south, sort of one in Birmingham, one near London, the motorways were chock-a-block. It was as if COVID-19 hadn't happened. Everyone's back to work. And I think it's a bit, I don't think they should be, that's not obviously my position. Boris said back to work and everyone jumped, but I think we need to think about new ways of working and different things. But again, positives out of this, one of my friends works for Dell. They've been home working since a week before the lockdown, and productivity has went up. Nobody's off sick. It's a big win-win. Other things I work in insurance sectors, Admiral, they're not taking any of their staff back into offices until at least January 21. And I think that's what we need to be thinking about, especially climate change. If the more people that can work from home, you know, saving businesses money from, you need smaller premises, you know, less cars on the road, less use of electricity. There's a lot of positives. But
there are.
There needs to be like people that have a big push to get it in that direction, because there will be folk that I'm aware of so far that are trying to still push us back to where we were yesterday, and it's not going to happen.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. I think we you know, the future will be different, and but that doesn't mean that the future won't be better. So let's try and stay positive. I'm going to write a screenshot. Everybody give me a big smile or a thumbs up or something, because we might use it in future events. I took a couple during it as well. Thank you. Listen, thank you very much. We've overran, and the majority of people have stayed, which shows how interested people are. We will continue to put on more events. We're just planning, we've a few in the schedule, which Aoife will be letting everybody know about, and we're adding more, and we'll make sure that we have plenty of time for the discussion part as well, which I think is important. David and Mike, thank you so much. You were great, really thought-provoking, really appreciated, and you've given of your time free of charge and generously, so thank you for that. We really appreciate it, and stay safe, everyone, and see you at the next one, I hope. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Bridget.
Bye.
Thanks, Bridget.